Welcome to another episode of the Jay and Rob Toy Show. I'm your host, Rob McCallum, but I can't do this talk all by myself. So let me bring in the Tarkin to my Vader, maybe the Vader to my Tarkin, my good friend, Mr. Jay Bartlett.
May the force be with you, my friend.
If that's not a tip of the hat to what we're talking about today, I don't know what is. Be prepared for a lengthy discussion on all things Star Wars. Of course, Star Wars is the most influential action figure line of all time. And we're going to discuss all aspects, all eras, and of course, collecting and what to know, what not to know, who to get, who to avoid. Jay, let's talk original Star Wars vintage figures, late 70s. What's the first stuff that comes out and why does it matter?
It's really interesting because the movie came out in May 1977. We didn't get the figures until 1978. And of course, the first four were Chewie, Luke, R2, and Princess Leia. A kind of strange assortment. Why they would release Chewie without Han, I don't know. R2 without 3PO, who knows? Maybe it was a production thing. Those were the first four we got, and oh man, I was hooked from the very beginning, man. You know that. I got a bunch of those for Christmas, and it was on, and I haven't stopped since.
But even more interestingly, and the story is now infamous or famous depending on your point of view, you couldn't even buy Star Wars figures right away. You had to buy an empty box. You were basically getting a box for Christmas in 77 for the figures that were gonna be released in 78.
The early bird kit, the infamous early bird kit, yeah, where Kenner was selling you pictures, just designer drawings of what the figures might look like. And, there would be 12 of them and you would get them as they came out kind of thing. I think that's so cool. I don't remember ever being a part of that. I'm pretty sure it was just the first four and then we got them as they came out in the store. I don't remember doing the early bird thing, but man, you know you have a successful franchise when you can do that and it works.
What's hilarious is that early bird model, the sign up and we'll send you the figure later. It sounds a lot like everything we do nowadays with adult collecting. Sign up now, and in 6 months to 8 months, we'll give you the figures. Just 4 of them.
Yeah, and again, man, it's so strange because it was just mock-up drawings of the toys too. Wasn't even photos of the movie characters. It was just mock-ups of the toys, and man, we were just sold right away.
Now, on the collecting side, I know that there is a display set up and that you have everybody's name, all the character names, and you can put the figures on the little pegs and stuff so they each have their own little spot, like a kind of diorama. Are those early bird certificates still out there? Or did most of the people just send them in or did they get trashed? Because it's just paper, right?
Yeah, you can find them. You can find the backdrop too. Of course, they're very expensive. You're probably looking at about $1,200, I would say. Now that's for the store kit. Actually, during Action Figure Adventure, our buddy Craig at Dark Matter Collectibles had the retail early bird kit in his store and had a price tag of $1,200. That's where I'm coming up with that figure. They are out there, but yeah, they're extremely rare.
Now, when it comes to action figures and taking into account all lines and what's rare and what's desirable and those like key marquee figures, where do you put those first 12 figures? Are they at the top of the list or should they be? Are they staples that every serious collector should have? Or is it more just of a Star Wars thing?
I don't know if you're just casually collecting Star Wars, if you need someone like Death Squad Commander. He's a great army builder, but I remember he was never one of my favorites. I'd much rather have a Stormtrooper. None of those figures are particularly worth a ton of money. Again, they were so mass-produced, and you're talking about Farm Boy, Luke, Vader, Ben, all those characters. They made just tons, and they made Vader, Farm Boy, Luke, I believe, and Obi-Wan throughout. They kept re-releasing them throughout the 3 movies, so they're available in huge quantities still.
Now, Jay, I'm not really a Star Wars collector, though. I've got a few new Star Wars pieces, and we'll get to those lines later. But if I'm looking to dip into vintage collecting, I mean, original 70s Kenner stuff, but I don't want to go full-blown, should I just focus on those original 12 or 13 characters, or should I just pick and choose my favorites?
That's completely up to you. My advice is if you're just a casual Star Wars collector, grab your favorite figures first. Your favorite character is the one that spoke to you in the films, grab them. If you enjoy what you're doing, continue and get the whole line. There's just over 100, so it's not a huge collection from 78 to 85. It's the last few in 84, 85 that are the ones that are worth a ton of money.
All right, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about those deep cuts and those rare figures, okay? Because I love collecting lines that have stories, that have a handful of rare figures, and I like lines that the vast majority of figures are easy to collect and that are fairly reasonable. You've already said they produced millions of Obi-Wan Kenobis, millions of Darth Vaders. But the last few waves, in the 85 to 83, somewhere in that range, there's some deep cuts. What are we talking about? What are the key pieces here from a collecting point of view?
It's really hard to say. I mean, if you're looking at top dollar, Yak Face would be, in my estimation, the most valuable one. But you certainly have key characters like Anakin Skywalker. He was very rare, and it was one I never had as a kid. Luke Skywalker, both in his Endor gear and in his Stormtrooper gear, those are both valuable figures that just continue to go up today. Those are some examples.
Now, Yak Face, was he destroyed in a landfill, like an Atari cartridge or something? Or was he just a foreign release? What is the story behind him, and why is he kind of top dog?
So the story behind that was the Star Wars line was done, and as far as I know, Kenner didn't really know that, so they kept making all these figures. Yak Face was the last one to be released. He got released in Canada and over in Europe. So he's just a little bit more difficult to get. And what's funny about that is that the European release and the Canadian cards are both completely different. So that's a super cool thing for collectors as well.
How do they differ?
The European release of Yak Face features the Tri logo. It has 3 different logos of Return of the Jedi in different languages. The Canadian one comes with the Power of the Force coin, which I much prefer that version.
So what about a guy like Anakin Skywalker, though? Clearly they must have made millions of that guy. Why is he rare?
Well, they didn't. He was released in Australia only, if you can believe that. And maybe going back to thinking about it as a kid, maybe an old guy who's a Force ghost maybe isn't too exciting. I don't know.
Now, collecting Star Wars, it seems like there's extremes now. There's a lot of easy figures that you can get, like the general characters, and then there's a lot of weird ones like Yak Face and Anakin Skywalker. Is there a middle ground, or is it all either easy or like super difficult?
I would say a good 85% of the figures are common. They're not difficult to get. Now, that being said, finding them with their accessories, the telescoping lightsabers, the vinyl capes that are often ripped, finding that stuff in good shape is a different story.
When you started collecting seriously as an adult and you looked at vintage Star Wars stuff, which figures did you go after? Which ones did you pick up right away? Or is that something that you even dare to tread into, given the price and extreme rareness of some of these figures?
I dabbled in the adult collecting world probably in the early 90s, and the first one I picked up was Stormtrooper Luke. I don't currently have this figure because I sold him right after, because I had this weird kind of guilt. I felt really kind of, I don't want to say silly, but I just felt kind of strange about spending that much money on a figure, so I did resell him. But that was my first kind of dipping my toe into the water. Of course, you know me, I just dove right in, right? So yeah, Stormtrooper Luke.
Now, I've done a little bit of research myself. I don't know a lot about original Star Wars figures, but there are 3 that I want to kind of bring up. The first one is a vinyl cape Jawa.
Sure.
This is a figure that is kind of a variant. It got re-released later. Where is this in terms of Star Wars collecting, and what's the story?
Top 3, for sure. He's in the top 3 most expensive Star Wars vintage figures of all time. The Jawa came out. He was a very prominent character in the first Star Wars, of course. And they did his cape like they did Vader and Obi-Wan, so they made it vinyl. Put it out on the store shelves, and the Jawa didn't sell. It wasn't moving at all. Doing some market research, they figured out, well, because, you know, it doesn't really look like the character at all. You saw the underneath the cloak of the Jawa, which no one sees in the movie. So they actually went back to the drawing boards, and they actually cut up a little brown sock, put it over the character, and then the actual figure took form. So then they rebranded him with a cloth cape.
Are action figures important?
Are action figures important? I mean, for me, they're my entire world, so yes, they're very important. seeing the way that action figures and the love of action figures actually spans generations, it's something you don't get to see in many other toy categories, and you don't really even get to see that with a lot of other CPG that's out there. I think that playing with, hopefully, our figures is gonna be a way for kids to, you know, reenact these amazing imaginative stories that they're seeing in books, in films, in TV shows. I think that, you know, with Masters, for me, the sky's the limit. You know, I see the world building potential and just the ability to put these toys in kids' hands and literally let their imaginations run wild. It's them learning how to tell these stories, learning how to have these characters play off of each other, and also that world building piece of, you know, imagining what it is to build a city, to build a planet, you know, to these epic battles. The storytelling opportunities for kids are endless. That tactile play is really important. And I think that, you know, things like sound features, action attack features, I mean, it just helps tell that story. And it's something that I think is also really satisfying for kids when they play. And then there's also just features that are fun just because they're fun. Like things like slime and things like, you know, exploding parts and launching. And, you know, I think of, you know, with a weapon or a vehicle, you want to be able to see what happens when you have those action features. I don't think that's something that's ever really going to go away, even as kids, you know, get more into that digital space. And digital play not necessarily infringes, I would like to say, you know, complements what's happening in the physical play space.
G'day, it's Trent here from Toy Power Podcast. So behind me we've got the wall of mint on card action figures, and this is predominantly 80s and early 90s action figures or reproductions that have been inspired by those sorts of toys that I grew up with. It's about 6 to 7 figures deep, so I don't have enough room to display all the figures, but just to give you a bit of a taste of sort of what's behind here, you know, big Masters of the Universe fan. This was one of the earliest toy lines that I had. So I've got about 30 to 40% of it mint on card, but this is getting really hard to get this sort of stuff. But Mosquito was a massive inspiration for me as a kid. I've got things like one of my childhood favorite cartoons, Inspector Gadget, done by Dick Animation. I just thought this guy was brilliantly done. Different versions of Inspector Gadget with the hat that pops up, that feature there, which is very cool. Bit of Toxic Crusaders. I mean, doesn't get as much love, obviously, as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but done by Playmates and very true to that design aesthetic we saw with Turtles and the bright colours. I mean, look at this. You almost need sunglasses. But for those of you who think I'm just mint on card, not true. I love my loose stuff as well. And behind us, as you can see here, we've got all the kind of loose figures and a bit of box stuff as well sitting behind it. Massive fan of Dino Riders, and that has been an epic journey to go through and collect all those bits. Transformers, I do Masterpiece is sort of my homage to Transformers, and Mask, another big one you'll see up here. But this has got a lot of my childhood toys as well. All my Ninja Turtles figures are up here. I've got Thundercats, I've got Inspector Gadget, I've got DuckTales, and all that Disney stuff like Darkwing Duck and really Tailspin, that kind of cool stuff as well. So whatever you see back here, love getting the loose stuff and putting it up on the shelf here too. Lots of stuff here. I'm just going to do a quick pan around. There's sort of the mint on card wall we were talking about. A bit of a collection of statues over there, a lot of DC stuff that I love. Masters of the Universe, Ninja Turtles, and as we come around we get into some of the loose collection as we go, predominantly all that beautiful stuff from the 80s, A lot of the Kenner stuff, Playmates, really, really cool Tycho in there as well. Very hard to pick favourites, but if I did have to pick, say, a top 5, just got a couple to show you here. So Rod from the vintage Masters of the Universe line. Who doesn't love sparks shooting out of your action figure's mouth? Bucky O'Hare, got this guy, bit of a variant here in Australia perhaps, with the orange guns, lost one of them, so I got the green gun, but Deadeye Duck, what a cool looking figure. Very good. Out of Ninja Turtles, had a very soft spot for Casey Jones. This guy came with me to the premiere, to the 1990 Ninja Turtles film. Pride of place with me there through that. Batman, I love superpowers, but I've just got to give a massive shout out to the Batman the Animated Series Combat Belt Batman, which I spent all my hard-earned pocket money acquiring for a lot of money. And yes, superpowers, how can we go past it? And Joker was a big favourite of mine there. Special note, hard to go past, more of a modern figure, and this is the Shredder I always wanted, and so very happy that NECA did a Fred Wolf-inspired Shredder that just looks incredible. Had to just make a special mention of that one too.
A man. He looks like a frog, lizard, Muppet. What is the deal with a man?
I don't know too much about the backstory of a man. All I know is that in the vintage line, he's very rare. Again, near the end of the run, you saw all these really obscure Jabba the Hutt gang members kind of who hung out in Jabba's palace. Because I believe Kenner thought they were still gonna go years to come, right? But they were cut off in 85.
Okay, similar to the Vinyl Cape Jawa, another tooling decision that changed the figures and form and kind of function. This is a term that gets thrown around a lot. Telescoping lightsaber and double telescoping lightsaber. What the heck does that even mean?
So what that means is the figures had their lightsaber built into their arm. So basically, the figure had a little lever, and you would actually manually pull the lightsaber in and out, and the figure would be holding the hilt. It was actually quite an ingenious design for back then. So you could ignite the lightsaber and turn it off, and it looked like it did in the movie. The telescoping part refers to it going in and out. Double refers to the fact that it had like a little tip on the end. I guess that was kind of trying to make it like a sword, where it's kind of fat near the hilt and then it kind of goes up like a triangle. The double telescoping lightsaber is extremely rare because that part on the tip of the lightsaber is so small and so fragile. Most examples nowadays, it's just completely broken off.
Well, Jay, I gotta tell you, we've been discussing a lot of very niche differences for figures when it comes to collecting, whether it's the material around them, like the vinyl and the vinyl cape, or we're talking about the tooling with the telescoping lightsaber. We're talking about figures that got released late in the run that are impossible to get or only released in one region. That's the kind of thing that really gets me excited as a collector, which of course is dangerous for my bank account. If you had to make a decision to help me decide whether to jump into Star Wars collecting, is that a yes or a no? Should I venture down some other action figure line? It is the granddaddy of all action figure lines.
It's never too late to collect Star Wars. The vintage line, in my estimation and my opinion, is a pretty small line to collect. There's over 100 figures. Again, the 83 to 85 are what's gonna hurt your wallet the most, but you can get most of the figures readily available, not a problem. I say go for it, man. Star Wars is the best. You know that.
All right, well, that's something I'll have to consider. And that other sound means it's time for Action Figure Spotlight. So let's dive in to some Star Wars figures to showcase. Do you have something ready to showcase?
I do, absolutely. Now, oddly enough, I don't have an example of my very favorite character, but I have my very second favorite version of the character. This is my original card back with the Empire Strikes Back logo of what's referred to as Bespin Luke, referring to his brown Rebel pilot outfit here. This is a great figure. This is the original blonde version. He was later released brown-haired variant, but he comes with the blaster and the yellow lightsaber, oddly enough. And yeah, this is just such a fantastic figure. If we flip it over, This is such an iconic image, and again, the card back is almost just as important to me as the figure. We can see the original Kenner action figure photography. A big fan of this style where it's just one solid color and the figure just pops out of the color. I think that's just absolutely gorgeous. Some of the figures you can get in the Empire Wave. And yeah, Bespin Luke is just a treasure. This guy is in one of my display cases and he'll be there forever.
You mentioned the card back, when I look at that while you're talking and showcasing, I'm thinking 100%. That card, that art, those figures on the back, that checklist, the collect them all. It is such an integral part to collecting at least the Star Wars line. Some card backs, whether it's vintage or new, I can completely be okay without them. I don't need them at all. But even just seeing that there, that Star Wars card back, it just completely reminds me of how important it is. And unfortunately, if I'm gonna collect Star Wars, I think I gotta collect card backs. I think I gotta get them sealed. I know, crazy, expensive, but I think that also lets me pace a little bit.
Absolutely. I've talked over the years, my very favorite toy artistry. It's the original Kenner cards. The style of the racing stripe, the logo of what episode it's from, and the actual photograph still from the film. There's no toy packaging that comes close, not even close in my opinion. I love it so much.
Now, as I said, I don't have any vintage Star Wars figures to showcase for our action figure spotlight, but what I'm gonna show is a prelude to part 2 of our discussion about Star Wars figures, and that is The Power of the Force 2, Leia Organa. Now, this is one of the original releases too, because as we'll discuss, they had some variations where this gets cut off around Vader's head, the tool and dyeing happens and to make the package stand out more. But I love this line of Star Wars figures. The figures almost enter superhero territory with how big and muscular they are. And Leia's guns, you know, even the pistol looks like a rifle. I just love the sculpt on her. I love the big flowing cape. This is just an amazing figure. And I can't wait to dive into Star Wars 95 to now and what collecting challenges there are on that side of things.
I'm with you. I remember when they released the 95 and we heard whispers that they were coming back. Do you remember how excited we were? Oh my God, they're bringing Star Wars figures back to retail. And from 95 till present day, they've always been on the shelves.
So that'll do it for this episode of the Jay and Rob Toy Show. Jay, I want you to think about your collection. And again, let's talk about what you don't have for vintage Star Wars figures. Which one is missing? Which is the top of the list that you want to add to your shelf and display case?
Vintage, top of the line, the number one figure I want the most is a sealed on-card Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker. Always wanted that. The current vintage collection I have plenty of. We'll get to that in the next episode.
If I'm picking up my very first original run of Star Wars figures, I've got lots of years to choose from, but I've got to start with something big. It's got to be an Amanaman, it's got to be a Yak face, it's got to be an Anakin Skywalker. I really want to have a nice display piece to kick off the passion and build around that.